With now the third attack on Russia's Engels 2 Air Force Base, as well as others and similar bomber bases in the region, it begs the question, why doesn't Russia just move them to another base where they're safe? After all, these bombers have incredibly long ranges and often firing extremely long-range cruise missiles. So why do they need to be so close to Ukraine? Engels 2 is at least 600 kilometers from the front in Ukraine, so it could be argued that they assumed that they were safe. After all, even if Ukraine had ATACMS, it wouldn't be able to reach it. But after the first strike in early December, why did nothing change? But first, real quick, our sponsor, NordVPN. As the name implies, it's a VPN that helps keep you safe online. But Nord is way more than that. It's pretty much a full-blown cybersecurity tool that comes with things like their threat protection, blocking malware, trackers, and more, the dark web monitor that scans and immediately notifies you if someone leaks your credentials on the dark web, private DNS, a dedicated IP address, and so much more. It's unfortunate, but you can't trust much online these days, which is why I personally use NordVPN all the time. It's helped me many times, such as getting around geo-restricted content like I've shown here. They also give you 24/7 support, they have thousands upon thousands of servers, and much, much more. And that's why so many top experts trust NordVPN. They're the best. So go over and check them out now at nordvpn.com/covert, and you'll get 4 months free on a 2-year plan. And as always, they have their 30-day money-back guarantee to ensure you're satisfied with their service. If you're not, you can simply get your money back. Again, NordVPN. First, you can't just base bombers anywhere. They require a lot. But real quick, Russia has 3 different types of bombers. Roughly 60 Tu-22Ms, 42 Tu-95s, and 16 Tu-160s. The Tu-22Ms are smaller, shorter range, and until relatively recently, just carried pretty much dumb bombs and anti-ship missiles, both of which have been used in Ukraine, but they don't carry the long-range cruise missiles like the KH-101. That leaves just the Tu-95 and 160. Both are much larger, that means they require longer runways, bigger taxiways and parking spots, and all these surfaces capable to support such heavy aircraft, facilities for maintenance, larger fuel and weapons storage depots, the command and control, plus all the additional support equipment and structure for the aircraft, communications, facilities for the pilots, as well as the hundreds of additional maintenance and support personnel, as well as all the logistics to keep the base stocked with all of these. So all that does really narrow down options that they have to operate these bombers out of. And this isn't just a problem with Russia, it's obviously true for the US as well as China and anyone else. Luckily, the Soviet Union had invested and built numerous bomber bases during the Cold War. However, a lot of those old Soviet bomber bases are now outside of Russia. They're in places like Kazakhstan, Belarus, Estonia, and several in Ukraine. Today, Russia has about 10 bases that bombers have recently operated out of. 3 of them, Engels, Dygileva, and Zhevkaka, are the 3 bases that have been attacked by Ukrainian drones recently. The others, such as Soltsy 2, which is in real rough shape and hasn't been used much recently since its bomber regiment was disbanded back in 2010. Ostrov is also in real rough shape and they haven't seen bombers recently. Olenia is roughly 2,000 kilometers away from Ukraine, putting it on the edge of the range of the Tu-22 bombers, which are mostly stationed there. But we have seen a few Tu-160s and Tu-95s recently though that have the range operating there. Then that just leaves those in eastern Russia. Belaya is 4,500 kilometers away, Ukrainka is 6,000 kilometers away, and Kameny Rushi 7,000 kilometers away. Of these, Ukrainka is probably the best bet as the others only have Tu-22Ms. And satellite imagery of Ukrainka from October shows 31 Tu-95s, which do have the range to reach Ukraine. However, that's a long flight, cruising at roughly 700 kilometers per hour and then launching their missiles at roughly 2,000 kilometers from their targets, then returning and flying home means nearly 12-hour flight. Longer missions mean more complicated planning and coordination, they're more exhausting for their crews. Also, extra stress put on the aircraft means increased maintenance and more downtime. It also means losing the element of surprise and allowing defenders time to prepare. With US intelligence, Ukraine typically knows when Russian bombers are taking off and then they issue an air raid alert. But the short distance from Engels, for example, means that they don't have much time to prepare. Also, redeploying bombers, with all the support equipment, weapons, command structure, communications, and personnel, setting up all those logistics required to deliver all the additional weapons, fuel, etc., take a long time. For Russia to redeploy these bombers to other bases mentioned on a more permanent basis, and highly active in a combat role, would take months. They could deploy them temporarily to other bases quicker, but without all the infrastructure in place, it would only be for a limited amount of time. Astrakhan Air Force Base, for example, is believed to have been used in a strike on Ukraine back in June. It's at least 800 kilometers from the front line in Ukraine, so likely pretty safely outside of the range of those believed Tu-141 drones Ukraine has been using. That is, assuming they're launching them from far enough back from the front line in Donbass. Olenia, mentioned previously, is another. It has a large enough 3,500 meter long runway that could accommodate the Tu-95s and Tu-160s. And like I mentioned earlier, we've seen both of them operate there for 2 months each back between mid-August and early November. There's no evidence though that any of them were used to carry out strike missions in Ukraine from there though. Also, now that it's winter, operations from bases, especially temporary ones, become more dangerous. In fact, a Tu-22M crashed while landing at Olenia back in January 2019, for example. The cold weather and snow also make it more difficult to conduct basic things like maintenance, as none of the bases mentioned, except Digilevo, have any hangars large enough to hold the aircraft. By comparison, every single US bomber base and all the Chinese bases have hangars large enough for their bombers. The other issue is dispersal. If Russia doesn't really have any other options besides operating from these bases that are at risk from Ukraine, then they need to figure out how to minimize that risk. Over and over again, we see Russian bombers just parked out tightly together at angles. From late November, just before the first attack, even just a few days after the attack in early December, and now again in late December after 2 strikes by Ukraine. This picture here was also taken just 1 hour after a reported third attack. There's no damage visible, and the governor of Saratov Oblast says a drone was shot down. But here you can also see the remains of revetments that the Soviets built. These are in case of an explosion, either by accident or an attack, it wouldn't damage the other nearby aircraft. Now Russia hasn't maintained them at all, and no aircraft have parked there in decades. In the newer images, you can see that they built some small blast walls, and they seem to be spreading out their bombers a bit more, but it's still not much more to protect them. And finally, air defense. They do have multiple S-400s near the base. However, these long-range systems are geared more toward aircraft and other higher-flying missiles. Lower-flying cruise missiles are hard to detect until the last few moments, at which point an S-400 wouldn't be of much value. And this is why shorter range and point defenses are typically deployed alongside of long-range air defenses. For example, US destroyers have long-range air defense missiles like the SM-6, medium-range ones with the ESSM, as well as point defense like the Phalanx. Pantsir and Tor, for example, are better equipped to quickly react and intercept cruise missiles the moment they appear over the horizon, which is just a dozen or so kilometers away. And as to why these failed, it's tricky. Due to the short amount of time available to react, an operator has to make a decision in seconds. And we saw a Tor air defense system shoot down a civilian airliner in Iran back in 2020. So it's a difficult job with very limited time to verify and make the right choice. Also, Russian sources claim they did shoot down several drones, and that just one got by in the attack on December 5th. In the December 26th attack, they claim that the drone was actually shot down, but the debris landed on the base causing damage. So, in closing, Russia has few good options for other bases. There are some further away and safe from drones, but again that longer distance complicates operations, and rebasing takes time. We have seen fewer numbers of bombers over the last month at angles, but several still remain. The only other option is to stay and increase the security at the base. Build more revetments and spread out bombers so that one strike doesn't destroy or damage multiple, and increase air defenses, which is what Russia seems to be doing. After all, Ukraine doesn't appear to have a large number of these drones. Otherwise, it seems they would have been using them sooner, or launching a larger number in each strike to destroy as many bombers as possible before Russia adapts.